Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. You are in a session which is talk about the customer success. The two of the prominent leaders from the industry, I'm going to be talking to them and what they are doing in the COVID era, especially in reducing the churn and increasing upsells. My name is Venkat Ranga, and little about me later. This session is a three-part session where we would be spending a good 30-35 minutes of time with these leaders and talk about what they are doing in day-to-day and how they are measuring the customer success, and then what the techniques they are using to continue to keep the business going. And followed by, I'll be talking more of a technical talk in terms of what those metrics are, how we should, as a business technology team, should build around that. And maybe 15-20 minutes after that, it would be Q&A. Please feel free to post your questions, and then we would be happy to get back to you in the last 10-15 minutes also. And if there are any questions we are unable to answer, we'll try to answer you back at later in the day. Without further ado, let me introduce the two panel members. And then I had a good time and a good amount of time I spent with these two individuals. They have really did an excellent job in their career building the customer success teams. So let's hear from directly, starting with David O'Callaghan, Zendesk. David, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. So yeah, David O'Callaghan. Spent pretty much the last year and a bit at Zendesk, but I've about 15 years SaaS experience. So previously to Zendesk, working for Salesforce. Either working directly or indirectly with a lot of success teams. I've probably spent the last 10 years of my career in renewals, which is, works really closely with customer success and customer success teams. And obviously our as a main function on what I'm focused on in Zendesk today is obviously building that, world-class renewals organization with our sole purpose being all around that customer retention. How do we protect, renew and sort of make sure that those customers that are recurring, that are coming up in a SaaS model, that we're driving success, but we're also making sure that those customers renew and are successful and that they're seeing value. So that's a key part of what I'm focused on today.
Nice, thanks, David. Looking forward to hear a lot more about your success at Zendesk and in the past companies. Let's switch to Derek. Derek, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for attending, everybody. We really appreciate your time you've given us today to attend the event. I hope you get a lot out of it. My background, Venkat, is in most of the customer-facing organizations. So I started my career doing implementation consulting and managing implementation practices, and then had an opportunity to join a SaaS company in the early 2000s, Salesforce, when it was brand new. And that's when I switched over to work in the customer success organization, and we began that organization and put that together. Stayed there for almost 10 years, and then switched over to a company called HubSpot and tried to take the experiences that I'd gotten at Salesforce and bring them to HubSpot. It was another really young company, and we spent about 8 years putting together a pretty good organization there that really helped our customers and intended to make sure that we maximize their value. I just recently was a customer of Workato and loved it so much, decided to come over and help do it again here at Workato.
Nice, good to hear. And then yes, I do like to learn a lot more what you did in the SaaS world, especially in a HubSpot. They have really pioneered those SaaS metrics, and then I think we are going to be talking quite a lot in this session today.
Yeah.
With that, a slight change into, I know some of you are already attended in the previous session. It's in everybody's mind, the world of COVID. It has changed how we work, how we engage. We were supposed to be sitting in a room, nice function hall or in the main hall to discuss on a panel, on a stage, but now we are in the virtual world. It is great. Again, it impacted every one of us. It impacted you, your team, and your company, this whole COVID. How is it really changed? David, would you mind give us some insights into that?
Obviously, huge amount of change, in not just in terms of what the renewals team have had to react to, and just from my own experience. So pretty much overnight, had to respond to customers in a different manner, in a different way. So one of the things we did, or as an example, we had to very quickly create a response team to customers who were, also being, pivoting and, changing maybe their strategies or their direction, mostly around how they connected or supported their customers. So, that became critically important for a lot of the businesses we support is, how did they get better connected to customers? So, making sure that we responded to those customers in a quick manner. So essentially what we had to do, as I said, overnight is really just create a response team with a number of other business partners within Zendesk. So with our finance team, with our success team, with our advocacy and customer support teams, was to create a group of customer facing organizations that was able to very quickly respond to those customers questions, their different needs around changed and evolved their strategy. So as I said, one of the key things we did was have that response team leveraged our own technology, which is obviously a ticketing system, to track those customer responses to from infancy right through to close. And probably the most important thing for us is through that was always around our focus or our shift towards customer retention. So making sure that we retained the customer was our guiding North Star, our guiding principle around that whole objective and that whole plan of bringing that team together. And it really, as I said, it brought a incredibly agile, overnight, we kind of figured it out on the fly as we went along, but it was incredibly successful to ultimately, leave our customers with the experience and obviously the feeling of, that they were listened to and that we reacted in a quick and responsive way. And for the most part, resolved a lot of those issues that the customers brought to us as well.
Nice. How about you, Derek, in your world, how that has changed?
Yeah, so, I think those of us that lived through the transition from on-premise to SaaS lived through a transition that caused software companies to really focus on the value that customers were receiving from what they bought. Where in our old world, that wasn't really something we focused on nearly as much as we should have, right? So I think the whole COVID situation has just really pointed out how critical that is to companies. And spend a lot of time focusing on making sure that customers are getting the value that they should be receiving for what they have. We've been proactively reaching out to customers that the statistics that we can see show that might not be the case, and trying to be flexible with our consulting time, with our CSM advising time, with whatever it might be to make sure that we're part of the solution as people reinvent their companies and their processes and try to figure out how to do more with less and get focused on getting through this time.
Totally. More with less is a common phenomena, and I know everybody likes that. So I want to switch our discussion to a little bit more about the business models. I know we talked about we are in a very unusual situation right now. Companies have to continue to generate revenue, and then at the same time making the customer happy. I know there are certain industries have impacted a lot, certain of them are not. How your business models have changed, or a sales model or a customer operations model has changed to support this pandemic era. David, do you want to go?
I think the main thing for us was really when our CEO turned around and obviously as well made customer retention number one point, cultural aspect, but also from top down, making sure that we're retaining and keeping our customers was critically important. As kind of Derek mentioned there as well, one of the key things that comes through is value in that, and I think that's an important model, particularly in a crisis like this, is that it really brings true to the front, how customers are obtaining value or not from your application, from from their investment in what they're meant to be leveraging. So I think that's critically important, that we did shift our model a lot closer towards listening more to the customer. What were some of the areas we were seeing from a both long-term or either short-term need from the customer. So I think from our part, in terms of I won't say any major model shift, but we did introduce a lot of things to help customers and kind of shift, if you want to call it the sales model, around doing more things around to support remote working. So implementing things like, we had a remote support bundle very, very quickly that gave away some product and service that customers could leverage. That could also help them secure more customers, and in terms of working remotely. So one example is, we had a customer, large retail presence, a lot of their shops closed overnight, and they were able to shift sort of, how did they shift those people that worked in the shops from a sales point of view to maybe now support customers. And that was one of the critical success stories I saw in just being able to model allows you to do that. So being agile and enough to help those customers and to work through. But there's definitely been a shift in I suppose what I would class as the levers. So new levers that have to be created, as I said, like the remote working bundle, understanding the value deliverables. So again, making sure that we are tying that back, and as I said, coming up with essentially the renewal itself is such a compelling event. But what we also saw in terms of the model change was a lot more what I class as off cycle renewals come in. So not necessarily every customer was coming to us on the renewal date. They were coming to us before the renewal date and asking, essentially, what is it we could change, we could do, we could leverage. So that was definitely a shift that we had to react to. I don't necessarily if it created a new model, but it was definitely a new way of working for us as well, around making sure that we were able to react to those situations. So
are you looking at a more of a discounting heavily, or coming up with a different kind of bundles? How are you ensuring the customer gets what they want, and at the same time, as a business has to run? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think probably two things we did. I think looking at billing and payment terms. I think that's the first one. Giving customers relief around billing and payment terms. For the most part, actually resolved a lot of situations. The other one was around, I suppose, sacrificing potential short-term economic, or revenue in terms of in favor of longer-term commitments. So obviously, securing customers in for the longer term, committing them in as well was one thing that we saw as well.
Oh, nice. How about you, Derek? What has been your acting?
Yeah, what we've seen is a tremendous amount of variability. So the first step that we took was to use our full executive team to split up our clients, and we divided them up into groups and gave them out, and right across the company, everyone grabbed a number of customers, and we set up meetings to talk to them about what the situation was. So we sort of proactively went out in March, and primarily in March, a little bit into April, to have a conversation with them about what was happening. And it was pretty amazing to hear the stories of what was going on. And in some cases, we had customers that were struggling. They were travel and leisure, and in the early stages got hit hard, or whatever industry they might have been in. In others, there were minor impacts, and it was about becoming more efficient and trying to drive some changes in the business. And then there were a number of customers that could not keep up with the volume, right? So as the shift in patterns in the customer base, in their customer bases, moved around, different people were affected in different ways. So we tried to understand all of those cases, not just the people that were negatively impacted. And then tailor what we were going to do with them to their situation. So there were many, many companies that we talked to about how we could help them. We also did some remote user things. We did some packages around Slack for stand-ups for remote teams that were newly remote, so they could stay in touch, and some tracking that needed to be done in some of the Asian countries that had put together strict rules with how they handle their employees. So we put some of that together, but we even more so, I think, focused on, all right, you've been minorly impacted. You really need to gain efficiencies in this process if you're going to keep it alive through this period or meet the goals that you had signed up for prior to these changes. And there were companies that all of a sudden couldn't handle the volume, and we brainstormed with them. We call them work jams, and we got together with them about how we might be able to help them through this period. And then, of course, on the other side, we tried to be flexible with the same type of things that David was talking about, with people that were committed to us for a long time, and it was a long-term partnership. We tried to be flexible, and we've had a few of those as well. But it's a very variable world out there. Everyone's experiencing this differently. Okay,
nice. Yeah, I think it's all about keeping employees happy and customers happy. And I think it goes on the both ways. I'm totally understand that. So let's switch a discussion about. I know you guys have continued to change the business model to adapt the new world, but we need to measure. That's what at the end of the day, our leadership team looks at it, an internal view, even the public SaaS companies, and I would say it's in the Wall Street looks at it. And certainly in this world, I think you're probably observing any SaaS company out there doing exceptionally good, and Wall Street is really treating well. No question there. So Derek, the question to you, and I know we touched on HubSpot in your experience, and then I come across the HubSpot metrics, the which SaaS metrics they built, the leadership team built, and then matured over the years has been a very interesting to me. Talk to me about your journey during those metrics being built, and then how your HubSpot went through. Can you paint us a picture a little bit to the audience, because that is how we have to measure going forward.
Sure. So the customer-based metrics, zeroing in on that just for this session, those were definitely something I had my hands pretty deep in for years. Our number one metric was net retention, as David has mentioned a couple times. And net retention was simply the customer base at the beginning of the period, say a month or a quarter, those same customers and their value at the end. So those metrics measured both the increased value of those customers through cross-selling, upselling, more licenses in some SaaS companies, more contacts in the case of HubSpot. And it was simply a value-based metric, right? Is there enough value that people want to do more, and the ROI is strong enough that we should use the application more and more? And on the flip side, also in there was any decreased value or customers that decided to move on from the solution for one reason or another. So that netted out to a number that we tried to run as a net positive in the customer base. And that was our North Star metric. There were many more metrics that we looked at, but primarily all of those metrics contributed to create an environment where that ultimate number could move. So we looked at all kinds of things around engagement with the platform in different ways, how many people were using it, what areas of the platform they might use. We got pretty sophisticated with suggesting adjacent features or modules that would add value based on what it appeared they were using, which modules and types of parts of the application they've been using to that point. So that was the big picture of how we looked at the metrics, Venkat.
I understand. I mean, in our previous discussions, as you're talking about the metrics, there is always a noise.
Yeah. Well, we spent a lot of time as I started to talk about mining information about the patterns that customers did. So I had a group of people that did our code to take a look at the data science side of it. We had obviously a large number of clients by the end of my journey there. So the numbers were statistically significant. We couldn't see anyone's data, obviously, but we could see numbers of use of certain types of areas in the application. So we would use that to try to understand very healthy patterns and very unhealthy patterns. You know, if you have two people that are actively working in the application and it drops to 1, then there's a single point of failure. When it drops to 0, then there's nobody taking care of the application. And that, we know, is a bad sign, right? So they could be much more nuanced than that, but that would be a kind of an easy one to follow, right? So we would take that information, actually mine that from our data warehouse that held these statistics, and proactively reach out to someone, drop that in a queue for someone to take action on. And by the end, we had actually got sophisticated enough where we could do some of that stuff automatically and share the information with the client so the client could take action on it. They may not even know, the CIO may not even know that there's no one managing that particular application. It could easily slip through the cracks. They could degrade. So we would proactively alert them, talk to them about how we could have a network where we could help them get a new administrator, what have you. So that was just one of probably 30 or 40 things that we were looking at. And we use that information to help the CSMs direct their activity. But you're correct that signal noise ratio was a term that we used a lot. And we used to talk about you really have to work these things. You know, you come up with something you think is right, or the models from the data science team say is probably right, but it takes a little while to get the signals, the instances of those to be valid enough that it's worth reading. And you would see that CSM sometimes wouldn't actually act on some. And that would usually be because we had too many instances of the alert and the false positive in there was high. And we would have to tweak how we did it and try to find the right point where you might miss some, but you're not throwing so much into the queue that it's not worth following. So that was a really important concept for us that we watched closely.
That's really good. That's really good. David, what are the 2 to 3 metrics you monitor on a week-to-week basis at Zendesk?
Yeah, I think as Derek has highlighted, there can be a lot of noise, as you try to figure this out. And yeah, I think ultimately you have to land on one. The analogy I like to use for this one is the leaking bucket. I'm sure most people have heard of it. So this is whereby you have holes in a bucket that, all of the tap that's filling the bucket is all of your customers coming in and all of the revenues, particularly in a SaaS model. But if they're going out faster than they're coming in, you probably have a problem. So really the telltale of our customers getting value, our customers being sticky, are you retaining them and keeping them in that bucket is, on what we track is churn and contraction rates and percentages. So ultimately how much is falling out of that bucket. So as I said, that will be our key guidance. So, what are the customers from a churn perspective? Are we losing customers in their entirety, or are we just are they just contracting elements of their investment? So they are the 2 main for us is really tracking around churn and contraction rates, and then obviously on top of that, the one Derek mentioned around net retention rate. So obviously as well of the customers of what they're spending. Then ultimately, how much are our customer base growing? So they would be, two key things for us as we navigate through this. Is obviously we want to be able to react to if we're losing customers, in a particular segment or a particular area. We can see that and we can react to it in a much faster way.
Beautiful. That's lots of good info there. And then I see your comments coming in. Thanks. Again, please send your questions and comments through the chat window. Switching gears a little bit on the usage data. I think, in the last 7 years, the stats out there, the SaaS companies have grown 300% in terms of the revenues. And then, of course, in the Wall Street, compared to the S&P 500. But at the same time, the companies who are following the usage data have grown 1.5 times more than a regular SaaS companies. That's a pretty interesting number out there. In your world, is Zendesk is following any usage data metrics or usage offerings, or it's a pretty straightforward? Any thoughts around that?
So from a model perspective, what we have seen is, Zendesk is obviously a licensed, typically licensed based on how many agents or support agents, is our suite. We obviously have other offerings around, platform and obviously, sell and growing into CRM space. But yeah, I think particularly in a COVID world, what we have started to see is working towards having a usage-based model. So what we call an agent pool model. So that's something that's gone down really well with customers in terms of giving them that flexibility to, consume what they need, as opposed to, a full upfront committal, on a longer term, basis, because, there is a lot of uncertainty out there, and there is a lot of, shifting priorities, and companies need to be more agile. And as I said at the beginning, what's critically important is how you get even more connected to your customer in times like this. So, being able to also give the customer the agility and the flexibility in those different models or those different offers that you can present to customers is something that we have seen, as a short term or even medium term solution, in supporting a lot of our customers.
Beautiful, thank you, Derek. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm crazy about usage metrics, so you've got my support on this one, Ben Cat. I think being a SaaS company, obviously that's really important. You need to do it for all the reasons I just said about identifying really positive and potentially negative patterns. It goes well beyond SaaS, though, right? Companies understand in many different ways what's going on with their product, whether it's electricity consumption or shipping patterns, or there's a lot of information that you can mine. It takes time. It's not the kind of thing that you just grab onto and days later you have this rich set of information. You have to stick with it over time. Start with the obvious, simple things. Work your way through the more nuanced information, get the signal to noise ratio right, like we just said, or move on from that number if necessary. But searching for that is extremely valuable. I also think that it's really valuable to be really transparent with it. So in a perfect world, in a SaaS software world, in a perfect scenario, that information would be visible not just to us, but to our customers. And in the meantime, companies can do quarterly business reviews and different type of joint sessions to do these reviews together and share as much of that information as possible, because ultimately we're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to help customers improve their business. And we think that these numbers tell us things, even in aggregate statistics. They tell us things about where opportunity lies and where missed opportunities are as well. So we want to share that and make it transparent.
That's really great.
Sorry,
please, David.
Just add one point, and kind of Derek picked the interest there. I suppose the critical thing as well. Think of renewal is always sometimes taught at the end of the customer cycle. We're to Derek said, part of the team. Talking about those customers, understanding where they're currently at in their journey with your product. So, what I like to do sometimes is just simplify it, and we typically have 3 types of motions, which is, is this customer at risk? Are they likely to just continue as they are, or is there an expansion opportunity? And it tends to come back to those 3 scenarios. And what I love to arm the team with in terms of metrics around that is just rounded one. We're talking to usage, not just about the model I explained, but also understand where that customer exactly at. So are they at risk because they're not leveraging a certain segment of their usage model or whatever it might be? What category or what bucket do they fall into? So again, as a team, then we're just able to react a lot better, and we're able to get to it a lot earlier, because the last thing you want is 1 month out from a renewal and the customer that's been on fire 6 months ago just reacting at that point. So I think that's why it's critically important to have those insights and to have that data around earlier to be able to, as a team, try and retain customers so you can, as I said, react early.
That's really great. Thank you. And I think, on the cost, close to we have 100 people on the call, and then I'm sure there are a lot of business technology folks. So I want to switch the, discussion around the business technology and then the business working together. So, David, if I were to come to you, a business technology team member, and then say, how can I help you? What's your answer?
Yes.
Succeed.
Yeah. It's very broad. I think, just using my own perspective, I think one of the things we like to do is leverage or use OKRs, but also, in sort of OKRs being objectives and key results, include, your business technology partner as a part of that as early as possible, because what you find is, everybody then is on the understanding that actually, as I use the booking analogy, that retention is so important to the overall organization. So therefore, being part of, those objectives and making sure there's a deep understanding of, how we prevent that, why the metrics and the insights that we're looking at around those customers, as I said, flagging, setting up red flags around at-risk customers, or, where's the expansion opportunity, why that becomes so important then, in the broader context, to, as I said, either preventing those customers falling out, or if there are customers where there is opportunity for growth, that we're able to see that. So that's one thing that, just my experiences, involving business technology. So, making sure that they're part of whatever goal setting you're starting out at the start of the year, the start of the quarter, start of the month, whatever it might be. That for me is kind of the critical part. But I think it's a two-way thing to understand. There isn't that endless resource either, or that isn't that endless list, and to appreciate that. But again, as I said, engaging the team earlier and showing them the number one priority around the organization is so important, and as I said, involving the team as part of that decision-making process as well.
Thank you, Derek.
So, Ed, I'm very interested in hearing you tie it off to some of the technology issues. But probably before you start, I just want to say to the group that's joined us today that there's a chat section here, and you can go ahead and put your questions in that you have. We're gonna save a few minutes at the end and try to address a few of them. So I'd encourage you to go ahead and put your questions in.
Thank you. Awesome, Derek. Do you want to answer how business technology team can help you to succeed?
Yeah, I'll be brief, because I think we should share some of your insights around that. That's probably better use of our time with the expert here on the line. But I think a partnership. I think coming to the meetings, sharing the information, the OKRs, and all of that help align on the goals. But just very close communication, really working to get the quality of that data that we've talked about be right. Making sure that you have a platform where you can action those calls to action that need to be done. You can understand a lot about customers before you even speak to them, so that you can enter those conversations educated and not have to have them tell you things that you should already know. And just be aware of what's happening so that you can help them with their business and not make it all about your business.
Yep, that is really true. Thank you. So with that, let's switch to the second topic. Is all about metrics. Let me take that from here. Thank you, guys. And then we'll be coming back. All three of us will be doing the Q&A in a few minutes. Just want to make sure. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you. That's good. So let's get started. So the SaaS metrics and the business technology. I know we talked about quite a bit on the SaaS. Derek has mentioned how this is being used in the industry, as well as David. I want to walk you through what the SaaS metrics are before just getting into the detailed discussion. So let me introduce myself. I am Venkat Ranga. I'm head of business applications at Ariaka. Just a bit more about me. I spent 2 decades, also more in industry, especially in the Valley companies, building a technology solutions across the board at different business functions and then whatnot. So around 2 years ago, I decided to join the SMBs to do the same thing at a different, they are different, problems are the same, but the scale is different. If anyone wants to reach out to me, those are 3 ways you guys can reach out. I'm happy to support you, any questions you have in the session or after the session. Let's talk a little bit more about what this means. In my opinion, if I say, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. It's not my words, it is a Lord Kelvin, but I think a lot about it. If I'm coming into the work, I'm doing something, we just have to show the results. I mean, the results can be shown through metrics, or there are soft metrics and there are hard metrics, are different things. But yes, we should be in a position to measure those. This has been my mantra for a long time. Switching the gears a little bit into what the SaaS metrics are. What I consider the SaaS metrics are the North Star metrics for SaaS companies. It's very simple. There are 2 ideas. One is organization to assess the growth, because any organization out there in the SaaS business, they need to see how they are growing while managing the churn. So that's, you guys heard from Derek and David talking about a growth and a churn. So we will touch on what those are. And the second component of it is increase the customer satisfaction. We are here discussing about how we engage the customer in the post-COVID world. And it all changed. So our methods of engaging has changed. In that process, we not only increase our net promoter score, but also talk more about increasing the value of the customer. That's what we call a lifetime value. So those are the 2 guiding principles which we need to look at it to get to a SaaS metrics, or a SaaS metrics is looking at. Couple of takeaways from this discussion I would like to see is, first of all, know your metrics. What I meant is, this is going to be a bit of a technical. I really wanted it to be that way, so you understand what Derek and David has talked about, the various metrics they look at on a day-to-day basis. So know your metrics, and then to build those metrics as a technology individual, what areas to focus, what data to be collected, what do's and the don'ts around that, and most importantly, the what kind of a surprises you may get in your way, which throws off you. So you have to be ready for that. And then it is all about the 4th point is to how you prepare yourself, is what I really want to, what would be the takeaways from this session. Just quickly, let me stop sharing. And then I have 2 questions. If you in a position to answer this would be great. How many of you working for a SaaS business company today? Oh, double click to SaaS to maximize. Okay, I will certainly do that. Sorry, I think it looks like, hey, Derek or David, would you be in a position to show me, share how many people are asking the questions? I think we have a couple of people saying, yeah, is this the pool? Yes, it is a pool, but I don't think we have a technology enabled. So we just need you guys type in yes or I am. So I see 4 of you out there. Yep, there are a lot coming in. There are a lot coming in. Thank you. That's good. And how many of you built SaaS metrics today? Do you have a SaaS metrics in place? I think I see some answers. Yes. There are 2. Kunal, Himamsu. That's great. I think I'm glad to hear this. And I think it's not me. It's a lot of you are using it, so which is really good. So let's talk about what those metrics are. Okay. So the metrics are, again, as I said, these are a little bit technical, but I really wanted it to be that way so you understand, you take away from this. If you are already using, great. If you are not, this will be a slides, which will be a guiding slides for you guys once you get back to the office. Bookings. When we talk about the bookings, it's all about what the new bookings created in this quarter. The value of all closed contract during the quarter with a varying duration. That's what the booking is. Average deal size is another important metric which business looks at it. Bookings divided by number of new customers. That is how you look at the deal size. And the contract length, it's very common. We do sell 12, 24, 36, and then I've seen even 48 to 60 months contracts. The longer the contract is, the better, but depends on who you ask. Some SaaS companies says, no, that would not give us the ability to talk to the customer, and then we cannot upsell. So they have a different ways of sorting it out. But average length of contract is looked by the Wall Street or the industry to see how long the customer is staying with you or is going to stay with you. Average months paid upfront. This is a very important metric. There are companies who like to collect the money yearly in advance, some of them half yearly, some of them quarterly. So it's all about the cash flow. The early you get the cash in, the better it is going to be for you. So that's an average months paid upfront is another metric which looked at it. Then the next one is average revenue per new accounts. This is also a very important one. You could really see from the angle of a customer, what is the revenue we are generating? Is the revenue today is more than a revenue from the last quarter, is what is being measured. If as long as it is uptick, it's great. If something is not in going according to your plans, you may need to make some different changes there. And then again, average revenue across all customers, that also makes very important. Switching to the MRR, I know you guys have heard MRR and ARR. It depends on each company, different business models we do. MRR is a new MRR, which is generated from the customers signed in this quarter. Whatever the MRR is, we just need to be able to capture that. And the next set of metrics you heard a lot from David and then Derek. Here is a churn MRR and an expansion MRR. The churn MRR is the last MRR pretty much from the customers. It could be an amendment process, or you could have lost in a renewal. We need to be able to track that churn MRR. Expansion is which David talked quite a bit, is what is being measured. Am I able to increase the share of wallet from the customer as part of the expansion? You need to be able to capture that and then present that. Net new MRR is basically MRR plus expansion minus churn. And ARR is nothing but a MRR times 12. And you also heard from Derek a lot about churn metrics. Again, this is a very important one. You got to pay attention to this. Total number of customers, what are the customers, in a company has at any given time, the number of new customers, as well as the number of churn customers within the last quarter. How many new customers have been added? How many customers we have lost in the last quarter needs to be bringing together. Net new customers is the difference of a new and a churned. It is what is going to come in. Now the percentage of the customer churn and percentage of the MRR churn, percentage of MRR expansion is something to monitor. Is that a right direction we are going or a wrong direction? This is looked very closely by the leadership team. So you need to be building the infrastructure to make it happen. Just coming into the unit of economics. At the end of the day, we have to stand up and say that what is the lifetime value of a customer? Is this increasing or is it decreasing? At the same time, in a perpetual world, you have recouped the cost pretty much very earlier in the contracts. But in the SaaS world, that is not the case. You are recouping your cost over a period of time. So you have to be able to see your lifetime value with the cost associated with that customer, which is nothing but a CAC, customer acquisition cost, is what we talk about. So you have to see what the customer acquisition cost is, what the lifetime value is, what the ratio. There are a good North Star metrics are the which companies monitor. I'll give you in a second that one. And the last important metric I would go with is months to recover a CAC. As I said, in the perpetual business, you are talking about charging upfront a big chunk of money. But that's not the case in the SaaS world. You are charging on a month-to-month or an ARR based, but it is a very small amount. So you need to be able to recoup the cost, what you spent on acquiring and in a certain period of time, so that you will be a profitable organization. And these metrics are typically looked by industry. Quickly come on to the other metrics. We call it as a ACV, annualized contract value, which is ARR plus one-time fees. Again, there is a difference. ARR and there are one-time fees which would come in together into the ACV. That will not be part of a ARR. One-time fees only part of a ACV. TCV is similar. ARR times the term. If it's a 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, you will be multiplying by years and then add a one-time fees. That's how you arrive at TCV. Upsell rate, cross-sell rate. These are the two metrics which typically measured during the renewal. Are we increasing? Increasing by selling the additional products, or cross-sell with the additional products, and upsell and the cross-sell is looked at it during the amendment and renewals. And average sales price is also very important for the business. The best industry practice looked for a SaaS companies are LTV must be greater than 3 times of the CAC. Think about it. If you have acquired a customer, and then if you cannot retain a customer for the duration of 3 years, 3 times of CAC, you're basically losing the money. So that's the metric which everybody looks at it. Months to recover CAC is also looked closely, around 12 to 18 months. If you can able to recoup the amount of money you spent acquiring the customer within a 12 to 18 months, it looks a promising, a growth company. I want to take a quick pause here. I know everyone is really going and implementing order to cash processes, especially, and you guys are doing quite a bit of CPQ. I want to get a quick feel for how many of you are building a CPQ. Are you using a CPQ at this time? 2, 3, yep, coming up. That's good. That's really good. Homegrown CPQ in process. Yes, Salesforce CPQ, nice. Awesome. Yes, Zora CPQ. Yep, that's good. So let's talk about some of the do's and the don'ts. Okay. Hopefully now you guys see my screen. Sorry about that. What I call a devil in the details. So the do's and the don'ts. When I say, the reason I want to go through this is, I think I'm also watching the clock. We don't have a lot of time. Sales motion. You have to understand what's your sales motion. Is it an MRR based or an ARR based? The metrics can be calculated differently between those. So talk to your leadership team, understand how they want to do it, and you got to get through it. Then the next one is customer. What is a customer? Is it paid or unpaid? Sometimes, business models are different. You need to be figure it out. What do you mean for what does it mean to a new customer versus, not a customer? And the churn. There are many ways of churn can be calculated. You have to understand what the churn mean. There are some customers who put a pause. Is that a churn or a not? Again, I talked about a LTV, lifetime value of the customer. Then you got to sit down with your finance team and discuss, do you want to add a professional services and one-time fees into a lifetime value or not? Each company looks at differently. So you really need to sit down and talk about it. And Again, clear definition of the CAC. It's all about sales, marketing expenses, and some of the companies sell through agents. What is that coming to the cost? So that needs to be accounted for into the definition of the CAC, which really get you the numbers you are looking for. And most importantly, I expect you to really sit down and then design your CPQ to capture this relevant metrics at a quoting time. That's why I asked the CPQ as you're quoting, is doing the new logo, what metrics data you want to capture. As you're amending and renewing, what data you want to capture needs to be really looked at it. The most important thing I would leave it is for you is do weekly, monthly, quarterly, or half yearly, whatever the data snapshots you have to do to report on a year over year or a month over month report. So that is the most important thing you need to look at it. Don't try to capture the new logo, new ARR, or a new MRR while doing the amendments and renewals. It has no meaning to it. New ARR is pretty much for the new logos. Only the churn and an expansion comes into renewals and amendments. With that, a couple of things I wanted to leave it to you is this is where you would be surprised. Business would come to you overnight and then ask you, we are going to change our product definitions. We are going to create a bundles. We are going to come up with the upsell strategies or a cross-sell strategies. We talked about the usage pricing. Anytime business is thinking of doing this, it would certainly impact what you are doing in a technology. So be aware of that. At the same time, be with your partner with your business so that you are ready to implement any of these changes into the system, so you can be providing the metrics it's really needed for your organization. With that, I'm going to stop. We can do a quick Q&A. We have probably around 6 minutes also left for us.
Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going back.
There was one question from Phil up the top who just was asking around measuring contraction of, is that gross revenue churn? So Phil, from a churn and contraction point of view, it's two things that we look at. Particularly as Zendesk, it's the churn and contraction percentage, but also the dollar amount, because a lot of organizations will sometimes track a renewal rate, but if you have 90% of $1 million, and then you also have 90% of $2 million, you're losing more as you grow. So what we focus on is the dollar. So how much dollars is churning and contracting out of the business. So what's coming into the quarter? What are we losing? What are we exiting on? As I said, from both a dollar and a percentage perspective, the percentage is really important to tell you the trend if it's changing over time for a certain segment or a certain industry or a certain region. So it is important to track both the percentage, against a segment or against a market or whatever way you want to track it, but also the dollar amount as well.
I think it's helpful to know it's helpful to be able to separate them as well and know this is the churn number versus the downgrade number, and then even sub-segment that into different pieces so that you can see the patterns emerge. Agreed, David.
That's really, really good. I know we left with the one question. I think as we are as a panel, there's one request for you guys, and I know you do that as a business technology team members. My ask to business is engage us early, because the things which I kind of described, the business notion or the sales motion, or which you are trying to take it up. If we are the last person, or the technology is happen to be an afterthought, we probably unable to support you, because there are a lot of changes needs to be applied across the multiple systems and multiple business functions. So that would be an impediment to what you really want to do. And this is exactly what I talk to my leadership team in Ariaka, and then we engage in the discussions to see how quickly or what can we do to support your vision. Is all starts from engaging us early in your decision making. that's probably one of the asks for you guys, and then that has been helping for me a lot. I know some of the business folks do. This is probably one of the takeaway and one of asks from a technology team for a business folks on the call.
Right.
It's good.
We have 3 minutes left. We have one last question here, probably the last question, and then we'll just thank everyone for giving us their time. But Greg Paris asks, what kind of leading indicator metrics are you using to be proactive about the potential churn? Now, I'll just comment on that, in an enterprise sales world where you're dealing with Fortune 500 contracts, then generally speaking, there'll be individuals that will be tracking that. And as David mentioned earlier, you can do sort of red, green, yellow, customer health. I like to do red, orange, yellow, green, just so that we don't have one in the middle. We have 2. There's a number of people on here that from HubSpot that'll probably laugh because they remember that. But you can rely on people to predict what's happening with those customers in those enterprise customers. But that was my business at Salesforce, in the enterprise business. But at HubSpot, with the volume we had and the ASP we had, we relied on statistics. So I think the usage data has a key role to play in that as well. There are various other things that you can do around COVID type of things where you're looking at industries and things like that. But generally speaking, the number one factor will either be people where you have low ratios, or the usage data has been my experience. I don't know if you have some other things, David, that you're leaning on.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think depending on the complexity of the relationship, potentially you leverage the team or the internal team to flag a lot of those red flags. I think the important thing on the back of that as well is to have the right process to be able to flag. So something we do is like account health calls. I'm sure a lot of organizations do them, whereby we jump on calls just to be scrappy around resolve a particular issue. So things like red account calls to get the right executive engagement, or what is the solution to help this customer. Obviously, that's not scalable, across all customers. So again, to the other point Eric mentioned using, insights and usage stats is incredibly important as well. Then for to be proactive in more of your scale business, but also again, it's great that if you have the insights, but then the question is, what do you do with it? So making sure that you have the processes and the people reacting to those red flags and those amber or red accounts that do go off, that it's pretty clear that there's an accountability there for people to be able to react to them and pick them up. I think that's probably the most important part.
Yeah. So I think we're about at time, and I wanted to thank the audience for their time. We really appreciate you joining us today and listening to us. We hope we added a couple of points of value along the way. I'm certainly reachable as well. So I'm Derek.Roberts@workato.com. If anybody wants to follow up on anything, they can reach out to me. And Venkat and David, it was just fabulous having a discussion with you this afternoon.
Thanks, Derek, and I really enjoyed having a conversation. Yep. This is beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
And thanks everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks all.
Let's wrap it up. Thank you all.